Hello everybody, Jennifer here, and I got a new piercing. I do research before I get a new piercing, and I like to hear people's experience with it. It usually doesn't sway me either way. If I have my mind and heart set on a piercing, I'll just go out and get it. But I just like to be prepared with some of the experiences that other people have had. That way I just kind of have maybe a little bit more of a comfort level going in to get that particular piercing. And you know, some people have some great tricks as to how to get their piercing to heal, or maybe some way that they prepared with a certain kind of jewelry or something like that that made it a lot easier. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today, is getting my tragus pierced. Now, if you're unfamiliar with your tragus, it is this tiny little flap of cartilage that sits at the front of your ear, and I believe its purpose is to help hear behind you. It kind of traps sound and ricochets it back into your ear so that you can hear a little bit of what's going on behind you. So your tragus, it is cartilage. And some of the questions that I know that a lot of you want answered right away is, was it painful? And yes, it was. Now, I've had a lot of piercings in my lifetime. Well over 20, I have to say. And so I kind of base my pain level for each piercing on previous piercings, of course. And I would have to say that this was probably, for me, one of the most painful piercings that I've had. I don't want that to scare you at all because I'm absolutely in love with it. I think it's wonderful. But my last two piercings were on my face. My last one was my philtrum, or Medusa, which is right here on my lip. And the one before that was my septum. Now, if you guys have had either one of those pierced, you'll know that the septum is probably one of the least painful piercings you can get. It just, if it's done correctly, it really didn't hurt at all. My philtrum was another one of the least painful ones I've ever had. I really didn't feel much more than a pinch, and it healed very quickly. You know, of course, everybody's going to have a different experience getting pierced. This one was a little bit more painful, and I will be honest. Now, I'm kind of new to the world of exotic ear piercings. Now, I've had so many places on my body pierced. I mean, I've had a lot of piercings. But my ears, I've just kind of kept the same for, oh my gosh, I can't even remember, maybe 20 years. So I thought maybe it was time to go ahead and get a tragus piercing. So to me, the tragus was just a really neat spot to get pierced. It really has a neat presentation where, you know, you pull your hair back and it's just right there. I've seen so many people with tragus piercings that have these gorgeous pieces of jewelry in, and it's just stunning to me. And if you've seen some of my past piercing videos and body jewelry videos, you'll know that I just adore BVLA. I just think that their jewelry is exquisite. I went on a search for the perfect piece that I thought would look great in my tragus. So I ended up getting the 9-stone Angela. It's a pretty big piece, 8 or 9 millimeters, and I was a little bit wary about whether or not it would fit in my tragus. Now that's something that I wanted to touch on, is that everybody's tragus, like every part of people's bodies, are different. But some people have really small traguses. I think you'd pronounce it, or tragi. Either way, some people's tragus is very, very shallow and tiny. And so you really need to go to your piercer first and get that assessed before you decide whether you're going to get it pierced or choose a piece of jewelry for it, because if it's really, really tiny and you might just get a teeny tiny little stud in there, if that's not what you're dreaming of, then maybe forego it. I, on the other hand, knew immediately when I looked in the mirror. I had never really assessed my tragus before. But in looking in the mirror, I found that I have rather large tragus. So I went to my piercer and I asked him if I would have enough room for a 9 millimeter piece of jewelry, and he said absolutely. And he pierced me with that in mind. And that's why I say that you might want to search for the piece of jewelry that you really love first, because my piercer actually pierced me for this specific piece of jewelry. He would have pierced me a little more shallow, a little bit more out to the edge, if I had chosen something smaller. So that's just a suggestion that I'd like to make to you, that if you are kind of a jewelry nut and a jewelry snob with some of these incredible high-end body jewelry companies, pick your piece first. At least get a good idea of how big of a piece of jewelry you'd like to wear in there, and your piercer can help you with that. Second of all, yes, it is a painful place to get pierced. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I have a very high tolerance for pain. I do. Piercings don't bother me all that much. I mean, I had 3 of my babies at home, I caught one of them myself. I have a very high tolerance for pain. This one I felt. I did. The last few, it didn't bother me at all. It was a tiny pinch, but this one I definitely felt. That being said, though, the healing process so far has not been bad at all. I was a little bit worried because of my hair. I have very long hair, and I was worried that it would get caught up in my jewelry. And it has not. So that might be different if you have maybe shorter hair that could wrap around it more easily. But since my hair is so long, I think it just doesn't have the chance to really wrap around the jewelry. I also want to note that mine is just about a week old. I got it last Sunday. My piercer did not pierce me with this large piece, this Angela. That is also something to note for you. A lot of piercers don't want to pierce you with something very large because they want you to be able to clean around it and make sure you don't get stuff behind it and that kind of thing. Now, I was pierced with another BVLA piece, and it was very small, and it was a threadless system, so I went ahead and pulled that one out and put the Angela in when I got it in. And whether or not that was a good idea, I haven't had any bad repercussions from it, and I did it a few days ago. I think you would just want to make sure to keep it very, very clean with your saline solution, and of course in the shower, washing it really well and whatnot. But I just don't want you to expect to go in, if you have a very large piece in mind, and expect them to go ahead and pierce you with it. It's probably not going to happen. They'll want to stay, small, but not too small, probably somewhere around 2 to 4 millimeters, something along those lines. The only thing that I found that can irritate your ear a lot is sleeping. And if you're a side sleeper, this might be a little bit of a problem for you. So maybe sleep on your arm like this, where you kind of have an area for your ear to set in, the crook of your elbow, so that you're not actually sleeping directly on your tragus. I slept directly on it probably the 3rd night after I had it pierced, and I woke up with it very irritated. It had just been rubbing on the pillow, and the pressure just from the pillow itself did not do it any good. Healing. So I find this, with the exception of that one night when I irritated it by sleeping on it, I've really found that this didn't take very long to feel better. I did find that the night after I got it pierced, for about 12 hours, that throbbing was enough to keep me awake. I got it pierced at 5 o'clock in the evening, so it was still really fresh when I went to bed that night, and I probably could have taken some Tylenol or some sort of a pain reliever to help it, but it did keep me up quite a bit that night. It's in a place where it kind of ties into headaches, and I've heard a lot of people getting it pierced to actually relieve migraine pains once it heals, but I could feel it almost giving me a migraine while I was trying to get to sleep that night. But that did subside the next day, and I really didn't feel any pain until I slept on it wrong, and then that was just for a few hours after that. So really, it's a pretty easy piercing to recover from, and unless I smack it or something along those lines, I really don't even feel that it's there. Like I have said with some of my other piercing videos, is how I care for my piercings that allow them to heal very fast and very efficiently. And I always do the same things, and they've always worked so beautifully for me, so I wanted to share that with you. When I get in the shower, I always just let the hot water run on whatever piercing it is. Obviously, something like your septum is a lot more challenging to do that with. But, you know, my philtrum, I did that. Any piercings that you can really just let the water just flow on. That's what I do. Warm water for as long as I can just stand there and let it just kind of flush it out and kind of stimulate the healing process. I also use colloidal silver. And if you're unfamiliar with colloidal silver, it's something you can get at Whole Foods. You can order it on Amazon. It is a really amazing natural antibiotic. It's not something that would dry out your piercing or any wound for that matter. But it does an incredible job at keeping any kind of infection at bay. And it also has this property that seems to take away pain as well. So you can get it in a dropper, and I just kind of drop it on around the piercing after I clean it, and just let it sit there and soak in and dry on there. And that's always really done a great job at keeping infections at bay for me. So other than that, I love it. I think it's a great piercing. I am really excited that I have it pierced for the piece that I really wanted there, and I don't regret getting it at all. Even for the small amount of pain that was associated with it, if you're afraid, it is so worth it. That being said, I do recommend just stopping in to see your piercer before you decide whether or not to get your tragus pierced, and before you actually go out and buy the jewelry for it. Because if you have a specific piece in mind and it doesn't fit because your tragus is too small, or your piercer just doesn't pierce you properly for that particular piece, I don't want you to be disappointed. Everybody's tragus is different sizes, and just save you the disappointment, and that way you can get exactly what you want, and you know, be ready for a little bit of pain, but it is so worth it. Like I said, this is one of my new favorite piercings yet. So I hope this has helped you if you are on the fence about getting your tragus pierced. And please check out some of my other videos on piercings. Thank you so much, and be well.